My association with Bethlehem started nearly 80 years ago. Now, I'm now 80 years of age, so it would be about 4 years of age when I remember being taken to Sunday school there. And my Sunday school teacher was Mrs. Hughes Rees, who happened later on to be my day school teacher as well, which didn't help very much. But the association of my family goes back to the time that the church was formed in the 18th century. And my grandfather was a Codur Cani, as it was called. He was the person who taught singing to the congregation and had choirs there. He was called Benny'r Gove, which means Benny the Smithy. And Professor J.T. Jones, a retired professor of music from the Royal Academy of Music in London, retired to Newport and was a member of Benny's choir. And he said of him, if he had had an education, he would have taken the world of music by storm. Such was his ability to sing 4 voices. But he was an excellent smithy as well, and the smithy goes down through his father and his father before him. He also made this pitchfork, which is C, made it himself, and it's to the perfect pitch of C. His work was commemorated. He worked for 30 years diligently teaching choirs to sing in Bethlehem. And not only were they Bethlehem people, but the community came together, people from the other non-conformist churches and also from the church itself came to sing in his choirs, and they sang oratorios from the Elijah, Messiah, and Professor J.T. Jones himself was a member of the choir. Such was Benjamin's prowess at singing. That was handed on to my mother, who played the organ in Bethlehem from the age of 12 years. 12 years. She walked from Wainfach on the Morfa, 3 miles to Bethlehem by the 10:30 service in the morning, walked home after the service and walked back in the evening for the evening service at 6 o'clock. And she played the organ for 78 years in Bethlehem. And this plate depicts her interests, the organ in Bethlehem, Bethlehem itself, and where she came from, Morfa, Wainfach, that little farm there where the smithy was. I have very fond memories of Bethlehem itself, especially in my childhood. Some memories having to go to morning service at 10:30, Sunday school at 2 o'clock, and then the evening service at 6. When the sermons got a little long-winded, the excuse was whispered to my mother that when she wasn't playing the organ was, I must go to the toilet. And of course I was able to slip out in the middle of the service to go to the toilet and not come back. But they were very fond memories, and we had a boys' brigade formulated there by the late Kerry Salmon under the tutelage of the Reverend E.J. Williams, and we had tremendous fun. I remember going to 2 camps, one in the Isle of Wight and one in Horton in the Gower. We had great fun there. We also formed our own rugby 7-a-side team, and one day Kerry Salmon came to us and said, "Boys, how would you like to take part in the Welsh rugby champions, Welsh and West of England rugby championship, 7-a-side for Boys Brigade?" "Oh, great," he said. "Well, how are we going to get to Cardiff?" "Oh, you let me worry about that," he said. So we took it seriously, and we went to one of the local builders, Edgar Jenkins, and asked him to borrow some wooden scaffolding poles, and we erected our own posts in the playing field, dug the holes, stuck the posts in and put the crossbar on, and we trained hard. And we trained also on the beach, running up and down Valley Fawr. And the day came when we went. Kerry Salmon had arranged a minibus to take us, and he drove it, took us to Cardiff. And we competed. I'm very glad to say that we won the championship. So Newport Boys Brigade had a bit of fame on that particular day. We were Welsh champions for that particular year. Welsh champions and West of England champions for the Boys Brigade. We moved on then, became members, and to become a member of a Baptist chapel you had to have full immersion in a baptismal pool, and you can find the baptismal pool in Veidir Felin today. Unfortunately, it's covered in growth now, but it really should be cleaned up and kept for posterity. We were then sworn in the evening and had our first communion handed to us, sitting in the deacon's seat, handed to us by the minister himself. We had very, very fond memories of our time in Newport, and I must say, if it hadn't been for Bethlehem and the chapel, and the congregation and my family, I don't think I'd have been speaking Welsh at the moment, because that's what retained and improved my language as far as I'm concerned.
Hwn o'i tyrannefoedd, sancteiddiwr dy enw, deled y deyrnas, gweneler dy ewyllus, megis yn y nef.
My grandfather Benny'r Gove, was the Codwr Cani, that is the leader of the singing in Bethlehem for 30 years, and for his great work there, his honesty, diligence, walking down 3 miles every time to practice, was awarded a certificate by the members of the chapel and also by members of the community. This was something that wasn't done very often, but because of his extraordinary work, this was handed to him after 30 years hard work. And there's a story about my grandfather when he was a smithy. The local squire used to take his mowing machine knives to be sharpened every June, and it so happened that he took the knives were taken up there to be sharpened, but when they were returned, they weren't very sharp for some reason, but which will become obvious. And the squire came back on horseback and ticked him off and said that the knives were not sharp enough, they were worse than they were last year. And Benny, who was a very forthright person, said to him, "Now listen," he said, "I'll sharpen your knives when you pay me for last year's work." Ready?
Yeah.
And that's the type of person Benny Gove was. A diligent, forthright, honest person. The musical tradition was handed down from my grandfather through my mother, and also to myself, and also to my children. I have fond memories of the pipe organ being built in Bethlehem. My father, actually a carpenter and painter, built the solid stage for the organ itself, for George Osmond of Taunton to build the organ, which was given to the chapel in memory of Mr. and Mrs. Evans, Penlan in the Gwaun Valley, who are very faithful members. And my mother learned to play this particular pipe organ, because the organ she played before was a foot pumped organ where you pedaled away to increase the air pressure to make the sound. But this, of course, now was a new pipe organ with feet pedals, and the organ was dutifully opened or first played by Sandy McPherson from the Wilfred Pickles show Have a Go. And he was very disappointed when he came to my mother and said, I'm so disappointed, he said, because there isn't a trumpet stop on this organ. And well, this organ was given. We weren't able to say what sort of stops we were allowed to have, my mother said. But he opened the organ and he played recitals on it for that particular evening, which I remember very well. My mother taught herself to play by her feet. And of course, the organ was used for singing festivals. I can remember the chapel being full, where we had the grand rehearsal on a Sunday for the singing festivals between the four churches in the chapels in the area, Carsalem, Jabez, Tabor and Bethlehem. And the singing festival itself was on the Easter Monday, and the chapel would be full to capacity and fantastic singing. One of the anthems that I remember being sung there was sung in the National Eisteddfod this year in Pontypridd, Teyrnasoedd y Ddeiar, which means the nations of the earth. Well, a very, very well-known and fantastic anthem. My mother played the organ there for over 70 years, and that was her life. She would go down and practice for hours on the organ and enjoyed it. And her musicality has been passed on to myself. I used to conduct a choir, four-voice choir in Newport for a number of years, and we carried on until I had an impairment to my hearing. And that's been carried on to my children. My 4 children were musical as well and played musical instruments and played for the National Youth Orchestra of Wales. And my second daughter, Gwenllian, is a professional oboe musician based in London. My family connections, my father was a deacon. I followed him then as a deacon. And as a youngster, one of the things that I enjoyed doing was to take the collection plate around, and especially if there was an audience upstairs in the gallery, the collection plates there had long handles, and you were able to stretch along and pass the plates along for them to be filled with people's contributions. The ceilings of Bethlehem are fantastic, actually, and I can remember when they were last painted, when the chapel itself was redecorated. The complete inside of the chapel was filled with scaffolding to ensure that the painter who did the painting of the scroll work in the center of the chapel should be painted in various colors, and this stands out quite clearly, and it's the main feature of the chapel itself. When I was a child, the old organ used to be upstairs in the gallery. You can see where it was because it's marked, one of the pews had to be rebuilt there. But it was then taken downstairs, and there was an entrance to the vestry from the chapel itself by the organ, and we used to go up and down there to have our Sunday school in the vestry, and then come up for the final prayer of the afternoon in the chapel itself. We used to be quite naughty on occasions. I can remember in the 6 o'clock service, when the sermon would go on. When I was a child, the blackout curtains after the war had still been left up upstairs, And of course the lights had to be turned on in the evening in the summer so that it could be lit up. And what we did was we would go out in the afternoon and collect cockchafer beetles. And these beetles, during the 6 o'clock service and during the sermon, we would release the beetles, and of course they would be attracted to the lights, and they would be dive bombing the lights during the service. And what we enjoyed seeing was the heads of the people sitting downstairs, all turning around to see what was happening upstairs, whereas the cockchafer beetles were dive bombing the actual lights themselves. These are the small memories that one has as a child of Bethlehem itself. Naughty but nice. Bethlehem has played a very, very important part in my life. I'm now 80 years of age, and I feel that Bethlehem itself should be retained as a cultural centre for the area. I was a trustee up to a number of years ago, but I've relinquished that position. And I find now that having seen the signs going up for sale in the front of the chapel saddens me tremendously. And I feel that we should endeavour to do as much as is possible to retain this building for the use of the community.